Hi, and welcome to Filmmakers Compass Podcast, a show where we talk about movies and, well, more movies. I'm D-Man, joined by CP. CP, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm really excited. This is probably one of my favorite debates that we always have, and I'm glad we get to share it with the rest of the FCP audience here.
I know, I feel like this is a conversation that you and I have actually had many times, and then it's going to be weird to sort of rehab it on the podcast, but at the same time, I feel like our passion for this conversation will just come through, but we're going to get to that in a minute. So anybody that's just listening and not watching, you might not know that CP is wearing a Captain America t-shirt. Now, if you're watching, you wouldn't be wrong in assuming that this topic could also be Star Wars, as I'm wearing a Star Wars hoodie, but this is just my favorite hoodie. So I'm also wearing a Batman hat. I think you could see the symbol. So
Oh,
I'm all over the place. It's like
yeah.
wearing Nike and Adidas in the same outfit.
I know. You did not plan this out very successfully.
Dude, you know what sucks is like I'm wearing my Star Wars jacket. I actually have a really sick Star Wars hat that with like Boba Fett and all the bounty hunters.
Hmm
Shout out Miguel. He hooked me up with that hat. I got a lot of compliments on that hat when I went to Disneyland. So that was pretty cool.
Well,
But,
that is pretty cool. Shout out
well,
Miguel.
to clarify, CP's shirt is the signal to what we'll be talking about today, Captain America, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But first, as always, let's jump into our shout outs. So first up in on the New Year's episode, our sort of 2024 recap and 2025 looking forward, Drucker said, "What a fun episode. Gave me flashbacks to the IBC podcast, which, as I've mentioned before, and I will mention again now, I was a co-host of for like 5 years, back
Hmm
in the 2000 teens. And that was a ton of fun. And Drucker, I'm just so happy you've been along for the ride. So and then he said there was always a fun list. So we did have a good time on the recap episode, just doing lists, just
hmm
saying like, hey, what
hmm
were some of our favorite moments, favorite things, favorite or things we missed, all those. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to that episode, I would recommend going back because we do also talk about what we're looking forward to most in
Yep.
2025.
Yep.
So next up is Ivor, who, in replying to, I think it was when you went to see maybe Nosferatu. I can't remember
Nosferatu. Yeah.
I can't remember what movie it was, but Ivor said, CP, go to that La Michoacana and try the tequila with almonds ice cream. Just, I don't know if you saw that comment, but
I did not see it. I also have not tried tequila with almonds ice cream, so
I'm not gonna
guess we'll
lie,
see. Might
Ivor,
be
that
good.
sounds amazing.
Might be good.
Does it come in shot size? I mean,
That's just called tequila, D man.
oh yeah, okay. I'll do tequila. You get the ice cream. There we go. And then I wanted to mention, I could not for the life of me remember. I was actually at a birthday party this weekend, and somebody brought up, they asked my opinion on Skeleton Crew. So my apologies as a shout out. I don't have the name of the person, but I did want to talk a little bit about Skeleton Crew because I've had a couple people ask me about it. So one of the things that's really interesting, if you, there's no spoilers right here. I just want to say, if you haven't seen Skeleton Crew, I mean, it seems like a mix between sort of Spielberg, like 80s films, Goonies, and then ultimately, I think Stranger Things is maybe its closest modern clone. But I
Okay.
will say this, CP, for everybody that's asking me, I've seen all of Skeleton Crew. I saw the finale. I thought the show was great. It was a fun new direction for Star Wars. I mean, it literally is unlike anything else we've really ever seen. And I thought the sense of adventure, they have pirates and they're searching for lost treasure and like all this stuff. It was a lot of fun. You know, that sounds very Goonies-esque.
Okay.
The thing is though, that a lot of the scenes they do, they remind me of scenes from maybe like Stranger Things, like
Mm.
almost like paralleled in
Hmm.
certain moments. And this is all I gotta say is Stranger Things, particularly season one, does it better.
Mm.
So it is superior, I think, as an actual like their filmmaking and storytelling craft. So I did enjoy those moments in Skeleton Crew, but I mean when they happen in Stranger Things, I think they're like fist pumping, get ready. That was amazing. I didn't get that from Skeleton Crew.
Mhm.
So, but there's a couple. Like they literally have a scene where there's a chase scene on bikes that, again, I think Stranger Things does it better. They have a scene where the whole kid group breaks apart, then they reconcile. But I swear to you, in Stranger Things, like when they all come back together and they're like, we're all together, you're like, Fuck yeah. Like that's amazing. And so I think that was really for me the major difference was that from a modern storytelling standpoint, I think there's actually something out there that is a little bit superior. But I love the homage to clearly films and styles of films that they loved, as the filmmakers. And then the ability to infuse like pirates and Star Wars and
Okay.
adventure again
Okay.
was excellent.
No, I love it.
So next up on our shout outs, just wanted to say happy engagement to listener Brian Ten Bosch.
Yay!
Congrats, man. That's so exciting. And well, I hope it's going well.
Yeah. And next time you're down here, we'll have to get a beer, Brian.
All right. And then we got some happy birthday shout outs this week to Antonio Torres. Happy birthday, Anthony. And then
Anthony,
Michael Juarez. So happy birthday.
happy
Got to
birthday.
I know I got to celebrate with Michael and that was fun and hopefully I'll get to celebrate with Anthony as well. So, and then finally CP, this has been a regular shout out for the past football season, but go Irish.
Go Irish.
We got Notre Dame versus Ohio State in the national championship game. I'm very, very excited. The game against Penn State was literally probably one of my favorite Notre Dame games of all time. And I know we don't normally talk sports, but I mean, this is my number one team in any sport, anywhere. And it's been a thrilling ride. So I hope the Irish can pull off, the unthinkable after, their one loss earlier in the season and come back and win the
Yeah.
national title. But I gotta say, the last title they won was 1988. So I was one. The last time they went was 2012, so we had to wait over 10 years to get back to the national title game. So, I mean, it's fun to be there too.
Hmm.
I want them to win, but I'm having just a insanely great time on this ride. So, go Irish.
Go Irish.
All right, well, that does it for our shoutouts this week. So, CP, I'm going to throw it over to you. It's time for our box office breakdown.
All right, everyone. Box office breakdown. Second weekend of 2025. And these are the top five movies at the box office. Number five, Moana 2. It was number four last weekend, so it's finally starting to trickle down with a 47% drop from last weekend. But hey, made great money.
Well, it was inevitable, but I did hear it's, I think either I don't know if it was North American or if it was all of international, but I know they were approaching a billion, which
Yeah, worldwide, it's about 10 million dollars short of a
oh,
billion
it'll get
dollars.
there. It'll
Oh
get there.
yeah, printing money with that one. So number four is Nosferatu,
Nice.
which has made $136 million worldwide.
That's pretty good.
Now, let that a lot of that's from me. I was a big fan of this film. So if you have
How many
not
times have you
seen,
been? Have you been more than three?
no, only three so far, but I'm gonna go see it this weekend for the fourth time.
Nice.
And I was just a big fan. That's all I can say. Okay.
That's awesome.
Number three, number two of last weekend, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. D-Man, have you finally made it over to see this one?
No, I have not. Been a little busy, but I mean, the staying power of Sonic is just insane right now.
Well, and it is just short of $400 million worldwide. So again, Paramount should be pretty pleased with this one. It's not going to drop
Do
out of the
you
box
think,
office just yet.
based on this box office performance, that we get a Sonic 4? Now,
I
I don't know
think,
what happened in the movie. I don't know if they like narratively were like, this arc is over, but I mean, it seems like this franchise is still rolling.
well, I will tell you, for one, there are post-credit scenes which tease a fourth movie, but also, I mean, $500 million is probably what this thing is going to end up making in the box office, and that's not really bad.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, not
And
every movie's going to be a $1 billion movie. So you're like, hey, I mean, can we get,
mhm.
imagine, I don't know how much a Sonic movie costs, but even let's say it costs 200 million plus advertising. You're like, if you walked away with $100 million,
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad.
sounds wild. I mean, I know when you're talking about a billion, you're like, it's only a fraction of that, but still 100 million, that is,
Hmm.
seems like a win to me.
So number two in the box office was number one last weekend, and that is Mufasa, The Lion King. It has made north of $500 million worldwide, and I still have not seen it myself.
Also, another one that I haven't seen, like I told you guys last week, I haven't really been to the theater, since like the holidays. So I'm going to be going back. But it is one of those things where again, $500 million. I don't know how much it costs to produce Mufasa. I'm guessing probably like 250 million,
Hmm.
probably a lot.
I would think that.
So I don't know if Disney's going to walk away, with like the bag, but they'll probably come out in the black.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that should be good. That should be still be a win for them.
Yep. And number one in the box office, opening this past Friday, Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. Now,
Okay.
thoughts on this, D man? Do you have any desire to see this? Did you see Den of Thieves 1? What's your kind of thought process here?
So no and no.
Okay.
I did not
Okay.
see Den of Thieves 1, and to that end, I don't really plan on seeing Den of Thieves 2. If the word of mouth was good enough, I might watch Den of Thieves 1 and then go. But having never seen the first one, no, it just doesn't interest me.
Okay. So far it has made $16 million worldwide. The international release though is only about 900,000. So this has not been widely released internationally so far.
Okay.
I'm actually really excited. I am going to watch this movie as soon as we are done recording this episode.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'll
Okay.
let you know. I was a big fan of the first one. It's a cool heist movie, but really the
I do
secret
like heist
sauce for
movies.
me is if you put Gerard Butler in a movie, I know I'm going to get quality action for 2 hours, and that's usually good enough for me. These movies have been made. I think the first one was made for about $30 million. I thought I read that the second one was around $40 million. So the $16 million gross so far is probably below what they were shooting for, but I'm willing to bet it's gonna
It'll
gonna
come
make
out in
it
the black
back.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love a good heist film, but I mean, I want to just call out like Hollywood. If you're listening, I mean, CP just said if you put Gerard Butler in a movie, he'll go. So, I mean, he's single-handedly floating Nosferatu. So, I mean, if you guys need box office results, just get Gerard Butler in there.
Exactly. So I don't know what our listeners have seen, but let us know your thoughts on those movies and let us know what you're looking to see forward to see next weekend in the box office.
All right. I'm really excited because this is one, like I said, we've talked about and we've sort of been wanting to add to our list of podcast episodes. So the segment this week is the question: should Captain America have been the one to make the sacrifice in Avengers Endgame instead of Iron Man?
Oh boy.
So there's a lot of reasons. In this case, I think last week we talked a little bit about whether the love story between Anakin and Padme works. And I think we both fell on the line of it does not. So there's a lot of reasons for that, and then a lot of things that you could potentially do, if it's bad dialogue, then get some good dialogue going. But in this case, I think there's actually a case to be made sort of for both sides, which is a little interesting. You could make a case for Captain America to be the one to snap his fingers and ultimately probably pass away, right? We know
Hmm.
Hulk did not pass away. He lost functionality of his arm. Captain America did take the super soldier serum. It's in the cards that maybe he wouldn't die if he had snapped his fingers. Iron Man just, having his tech to protect him.
Hmm.
But we're going to operate here under the assumption that he would die.
Okay. I think that's a very fair premise to operate on.
Right. So, when we're going through, the reasons why he would make this sacrifice, it's all assuming that if he were to snap his fingers like Iron Man, Captain America would also perish. So, just wanted to clarify that out of the gate so nobody's, calling us out and being like, "Well, we don't even know if he would even die." I'm like, well, we do know that because we set the ground rules. He will die. So, in this hypothetical. So, I don't know. I want to throw it over to you. What are your thoughts here?
Oh boy. Well, I think the Iron Man sacrifice works very well. It is a good conclusion to his arc. But I personally believe that Captain America should have been the one to snap his fingers.
Okay. I mean, why, like, what would the reasons be why Captain America should have been the one to make the sacrifice? What are you
So
thinking?
I was listening to a couple as we were thinking about it. The first one is it is kind of a symbolic end to to Captain America's story,
Okay.
right? When we go back to to Captain America, the first Avenger, the movie, right? His story from the beginning is about his selfishness and his commitment to his higher ideals, right?
Yeah.
He is the guy who sacrifices himself by jumping onto grenades. He is the guy who's willing to sacrifice himself by taking down the plane. In the Avengers movie, he talks to Iron Man about not, he criticizes Tony Stark for not being the guy who's willing to, lay down on the barbed wire. But
Yeah.
Captain America is. So it seems very in line with his character that he would be willing to put it all on the line for a cause that he believed in. Because
And
we've
I
seen
actually
him do it multiple times.
I do agree with you that I mean I think if the narrative journey had given the moment to Captain America, he totally would have snapped his fingers.
And,
So it just fell to Iron Man, but I think yeah, if it was Cap that ended up, getting a hold of the Infinity Gauntlet, he would have done it.
and on top of it, I mean, remember, we kind of had a false sacrifice at the end of First Avengers where he does take the plane down and he doesn't die, but he's frozen in the Arctic. But that movie ends with Captain America sacrificing his life to end World War II.
Yeah, and he essentially did. He woke up and was like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, yeah. But so he's willing to make the sacrifice. It brings his story full circle in the sense that he has always kind of been the moral center of the Avengers, even to the
Yeah.
point that he's calling his teammates out for the language they use.
Yeah. Language.
So the story of sacrifice and service and commitment to team, right? He has the conversation multiple times where he says, "Hey, we don't trade lives." Like he is the moral center, and as the moral center, he'd follow through.
Yeah, I totally believe he would too. 100%. I think Tony Stark, I think it's interesting too that if you look at, his arc and sort of the completion, which I think works. I think narratively, right, the first Iron Man movie ends with him not snapping his fingers, standing up and saying, "I am Iron Man," and then you have
Mm-hmm.
him snap his fingers and he's like, "I am Iron Man." Obviously, that juxtaposition works really, really well. But there also was the fact that I know Tony put a lot on the line, now having a daughter, he's married, he has his family, and obviously I love Tony's his monologue at the end that he recorded for everybody, where he talks about like, unfortunately part of the journey is the end, and we've reached the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it was terribly emotional, but at the same time, I think Tony doesn't need to die to complete that arc of selflessness, sort of going from the selfish egomaniac tech billionaire or whatever Cap says,
Mm-hmm.
and then he's like playboy genius, philanthropist,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I don't
Yeah.
remember his line. So I don't know if he needs to do that, but narratively it does work really well. So in that instance, I mean, I think I prefer it that it be Iron Man
Really?
narratively
Okay.
just because it was so powerful a moment that I think, we started the MCU with Tony's journey, and then, in Endgame, it's Tony that is the one that's making that sacrifice. I think that was really important. And, even though Endgame spends a ton of time with really the three main protagonists of the MCU during, the Infinity Saga, which are Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor,
Mm-hmm.
it's Tony that started and ended it, right?
That's true. That's a good point.
So I do like that. My other question to you then is how do you feel about what Captain America did get as an ending? Do you like the fact that he goes, back in time to
No,
just be
no,
with Peggy?
no, no. For one, I don't think it does justice to who the character of Steve Rogers is. And I think there's another major problem that is kind of left hanging in the MCU with the way the story ends. And it goes back to why Steve should have sacrificed himself to begin with. And that's there is this question of who is to be the successor to Captain America, right? We
Yes.
we had a whole
Bucky
show
or
about it, right?
yeah, Falcon.
Bucky or Sam, right? So I think that in the moment where Captain America makes the sacrifice, he could have symbolically and physically actually handed off his shield to someone and been like, "I'm out," finger snap. And I think that would have been really powerful in kind of, and I think really helped fans get behind who the new Captain America was because there was a lot of division. Some people were like it should be Falcon, other people were like it should be Bucky, and
Yeah, I
cases
think
can be made for either one. But I think had Steve made the choice at the end of the movie when he died, people would have said, "Yes, I'm all in." Now,
I actually do like that pick of Falcon. I mean, I think he is the actual like character-wise successor.
mhm,
I know even in the comics, right, Bucky has, had the mantle of Captain America and had the shield. But ultimately, like, I don't think Bucky was really in a place to take up that mantle the way I think Sam was.
No, I totally agree.
But
But
I do know that number one argument is always Sam doesn't have the super soldier serum and Bucky does. So, like,
so there's a little bit of both there. Now, what do I think fails? The real failure in the Captain America story is I understand he uses the time machine, he goes back, but it feels like he's sitting out the apocalypse, and that is fundamentally un-Captain America.
explain that more.
Well, this is always the guy that puts it all on the line, right? He says it himself. We don't trade lives. At the end, the Avengers are destroyed, and he is out there on the front line alone against Thanos and his army of darkness,
Yeah.
right? Because he is willing to do whatever it takes and
God,
fight the good fight
what
and
an epic
stand up
shot.
for what he believes in. And I find it really weird that once the world has been saved, Captain America says, you know what? I've spent my whole life fighting for what I believe in. So much to the point that when we first meet the character of Steve Rogers, before he gets the the super soldier serum,
Yeah.
skinny little guy holding up the trash can lid, taking on the thugs, and he's like, I'll do this all day. He is the guy who will fight the fight that he believes needs fighting. So why is it that when we get to the end of his arc, he says, you know what? I already put in my time. I did my service. I'm now gonna sit back and live the life I wanted selfishly. I just don't buy it. I
Well,
don't
okay. So
buy. Okay.
there's two things with that stand out to me. So first of all, one is I guess on the main timeline, like symbolically by him leaving the timeline, it is kind of like he died, even though I guess technically came back.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I do get your point, which is like, okay, so he goes to hang out with Peggy. I mean, is he just not going to be Captain America over there, like in the other timeline? Because
And
like I think of it like this: at the end of Dark Knight Rises, Bruce Wayne disappears with Selena Kyle, and apparently they go to a cafe in Europe. I
right.
don't know. But like the way that Nolan established his Batman universe, there's just no reality in which Bruce Wayne would cease being Batman if he's capable of being Batman. It's not who he is. Like I think if you look at Nolan's trilogy, they establish this right out of Batman Begins at the very end when Rachel's like, there may be a time where like you're no longer needed as Batman, but until that day, like we can't be together. Because and then like you go to the Dark Knight, and that translates again to her choosing Harvey Dent and sort of, being like, there won't come a day where you don't need Batman. And then you go to Dark Knight Rises, Alfred leaves because he's like, you're gonna kill yourself doing this. And just like thematic, like throughout the whole thing, I'm not even saying Bruce Wayne needs to die. We're talking about who should have died at the end of Endgame, Iron Man or Captain America. I'm like, I'm not even arguing that Batman needs to go. I'm just saying that there's no world in which he's alive that if Gotham was in trouble, he wouldn't come save it. And I feel like Captain America is that. Like, there's no world in which he would just sit on the sidelines and be like, oh, I guess some crazy shit with Doctor Doom's going down in my old timeline, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think he would do that.
Well, and I mean, remember, Endgame is about him fighting the Thanos of another timeline. So it makes me think that the events of one timeline aren't necessarily going to keep Steve Rogers from doing the right thing
Yeah, and then
because he
like
believes in the right thing.
if he wanted to find that, what do you call it, that piece that Tony was talking about or whatever, and he's like, even if he went to another timeline, like he would still be himself. He'd still be Captain America.
And he'd
Like
still be fighting injustice.
like he talks about sometimes where I think it was in Civil War, like Captain America actually says, he's like, if there's somebody in trouble, I have to run in there. And he's like, but sometimes I wish I didn't. And Iron Man, literally, Tony Stark is like, no, you don't. Like, you love it. It's who you are, and that's part of your character. And so it's just weird. I kind of get what you're saying. Like, at
Well,
least the ending that he got feels just a tinge off. I know, like, there's literally, like, the actor is supposed, maybe he's not going to play the role anymore, and they're trying
that's
to
fine.
send him off,
That's
you
fine.
know, into the sunset. But at the same time, it's like, I just can't imagine a world where Steve Rogers would just be like, I'll pass on this battle.
Well, and remember, the whole premise of Captain America: The First Avenger, right, is that he is selected as the candidate for the testing not because he's the strongest, fastest, best, best guy with a gun, and it's because he has the heart that does the right thing. And I just felt like his actions at the end were not that guy that we watched through 7 movies.
Yeah. I mean that I guess I get what you're saying, especially about the ending that he did get, because it just feels a little off. Something off about it. But and then seeing Steve all old, like how
Mhm.
long like did he live over in that other timeline for like 100 years?
Yeah,
You
right.
know,
I'm
is he
like,
like Aragorn? Like he's 186 or something, you know? He has unnatural long life. I mean, we saw what
yeah,
happened to Gollum.
yeah, no, I
Steve
agree.
Rogers could have come back another 100 years later and looked like a friggin' troll. You know, he's
Yeah.
like, Sam, here is your shield. And then he takes it back. He's like, my precious.
Gollum,
Yeah,
Steve Rogers.
make that comic. Put it in the next what if.
Yeah, right.
There you go. So yeah, I don't know. That stood out to me. And I think Nolan's trilogy, which I love, I definitely like I see a world in which if Batman's still alive, but maybe he actually is physically broken down, then you get Batman Beyond, where he's a mentor to whoever the next person is that takes up the mantle of Batman. But he just wouldn't disappear. I also don't think that Alfred would ever leave. I mean, I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but like I don't think Alfred would ever leave Batman, but that's another story. That's another podcast episode. He never left on Batman the Animated Series, did he?
I don't remember him leaving.
Well, in Batman and Batman Returns, he was too old to leave.
Maybe he was gonna go to like, I don't know, like a retirement home.
Yeah, he just left the physically, but he'd still be there if Bruce Wayne needed him to like send, a message or something, he'd totally do it. One of the things I also want to talk about was, okay, Iron Man does snap his fingers. What does that mean for the future of the MCU? Again, maybe this is an instance where Robert Downey Jr. is like, "Hey, uh, I'm out. This is my last movie. The character cannot go on." Fine. So what does that open up for? There's got to be a new, top dog in the Avengers team. And then narratively, if you close the whole Infinity Saga arcs like they did, sort of what do you do next? And I mean, the MCU has sort of been a mess since then because they never really wrote a character quite like Iron Man. I don't know. I thought that was definitely interesting because I know we're getting an Ironheart series. I didn't particularly like her introduction in Wakanda Forever,
Hmm.
just my 2 cents. But yeah, I don't know. I think
I think the problem that I see with Endgame is this. You take the driving force of the entire MCU, which is as Iron Man, right?
yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of reiterating what you're saying here. If you close the book on Steve Rogers, which is fine and it works, especially since he's a man out of time,
Yeah.
he doesn't really fit in our world. He's never seen Star Wars, he's never listened to Nirvana, right?
Wait, didn't he have Star Wars crossed off or was it Star Trek?
I don't know. One of them was crossed off.
Yeah, he had both of them.
But the point is, he is a man out of time. So, what a great way to send him off, then, you know, kind of close the book on him. But at the same time, they'd created Iron Man as the driving force, continuing, he was the through line through the MCU, and he finally evolved to a new chapter in the character's life. He was Tony Stark husband, Tony Stark father. Why did we have to get rid of that Tony Stark? If they actually wanted to continue the MCU on, we should have kept Tony Stark in this new version going forward. And maybe Tony Stark is a little more hesitant now that he does have a daughter to live for and a wife in Pepper. And his actions now reflect maybe an older, wiser, much more conservative and cautious superhero than the Tony Stark that we saw in Iron Man 1 and 2, who is kind of not afraid to put it all on the line, right?
Do you think the writers performed like a narrative magic trick where in introducing his daughter, they not only raised the stakes for his participation in the time heist, but also in introducing his daughter, doesn't that sort of make us think that like he's not going to die? So like maybe they were trying to pull one over on us where it's like, oh well, they're not going to kill Tony now that he's a dad, and then they do it, and you're like, oh my God, it's even more emotional than I ever thought I would be, because the stakes got that.
I mean, that works, but I think part of the problem, and you sort of said this yourself, was there was no clear plan for what to do after the MCU. So instead of rolling into this phase five like everything is all the same without Tony Stark, if Tony Stark was to be the one to do the snap, then Marvel needed to end the MCU after phase four. And the plan should have been like it starts with Iron Man, it ends with Iron Man. We're bookending this story. Now we're off to Young Avengers, Dark Avengers, whatever. But a new MCU we're building.
Would you ever be opposed to them just like rebooting the whole thing, just recasting everybody?
I mean, as long as they're not telling the same story, I don't think there's a problem with it. I
Yeah,
think
like
the
what if
problem is
they
they're
reboot it and then they told like the Secret Wars, but they don't do it with all the same people. They
uh,
just
I think the
reboot it.
problem is they're trying to make this one cohesive MCU universe absent Steve Rogers, absent
Iron
Tony
Man.
Stark as we know them in Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, and it just feels wrong.
Well,
Especially
even now,
since
Black Panther, I mean, that's beyond their control,
Mhm.
but still, he's not here, T'Challa. I mean, that's always a problem you're going to run into with these shared universes is like the actors either age out of the roles that they're in,
Mhm.
and for some of these guys, you're talking about like look at Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, having to get that ripped and be that buff to play the role. Like some of these guys can't maintain this for, 10 years is a long time. And I know
Mhm.
you can ramp up, ramp down, whatever, but like, I mean, to get that fit is incredibly, incredibly hard.
Oh yeah,
I
no,
mean,
you're
everybody
right.
knows they just made their New Year's resolutions. So like this was an inherent problem that they were always going to run into is that either eventually these actors would age out, they would get too expensive, or they would just run into fatigue and be like, you know what, guys, it's my time. And
Mhm.
so when that happens, right, you end up having to figure out, A, narratively, how to phase them out, but you really can't like just recast. I know Marvel introduced the multiverse and they have all these different variants and stuff. It's like, oh, you could just introduce like a different Tony from a different timeline, whatever. But I think like you said, it just sort of makes everything feel messy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's convenient. Okay. Where I mean, maybe if you just rebooted the whole thing, you still do a shared universe where you have multiple heroes and you're recasting and they have all these shared movies and team up movies and all that. It's just you just start over and do it with like a different Avengers story.
Well, it gets a lot cheaper, but also it allows us to invest in the characters and see them truly grow the way that they're supposed to be.
Yeah, and then I don't know about the comics. I know, like you think about Spider-Man, generally like Uncle Ben gets killed and Batman's parents get murdered outside the theater. Like some of the origin stories have been repeated so many times and there's not really many variations. They're so ingrained in our connection to the character. But I'm sure for a lot of characters, you could find new or unique ways to sort of, do an origin story in a new fun way.
No, I would agree. I think you're right.
So like and origin stories are fun. It's
Hmm.
fun to start at the beginning and get the whole story. It just I don't know. And then you have to ask yourself, so you have Captain America and you have Iron Man. And I think we talked about this a little bit when we talked about Avengers Endgame as a whole, but essentially like who takes over those roles narratively? Funding for the team, leader for the team, internal conflict for the team. And then not only that, but you look at the idea of the arc. So you have to start at the beginning. And I
Hmm.
feel like part of the problem Marvel's running into is that they're carrying over characters from phase one into phase two, but really, like, it should start now. Like, whatever the arc is, like, start it here. And
Hmm.
instead, they're trying to, like, we started some arcs over here. They're gonna pass over Endgame, and then they'll be in phase two. And it's like, I don't know. Now you kind of got you had to have watched all these old movies. Like maybe we should have started over.
Hmm.
Maybe even if you kept the same actors, but it's like narratively, like start all their arcs. Here's the starting line.
Hmm.
Don't carry it all over. It's too much baggage. And that's why I think when they turned to Doomsday instead of Kang, which I understand again, they ran into an actor issue and had to recast, but
You mean Doctor Doom?
Doctor Doom, yeah, sorry, not Doomsday. And yeah, Doctor Doom. And they sort of just returned to the people who were successful in the previous phase. But even now, like, have you felt anything currently build to anything like that?
No, and the problem is that I see is this. There's not even, at least when phase one started, it was very clear we're following Iron Man, we're following Thor, we're following Captain America.
Hmm.
And so at least we see the progression of those three characters carry over into Endgame. And I mean, again, the Thor arc, which is not relevant to this conversation, is actually really strong throughout all four phases.
Yeah.
The Iron Man arc is strong throughout all four phases. The Captain America arc is strong throughout all four phases. But the problem now is we don't know whose arc we're supposed to be following.
Yeah, you need sort of a main engine that like propels everybody else to the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we don't have that. And then B, like I said, it's like Marvel never reset the start line. So
Mm-hmm.
you just have this carryover from all these different stories that eventually they're not building to anything. And particularly now it's Doctor Doom. So up to this point in the MCU, like we literally just got Deadpool and Wolverine. I haven't heard anything about anything that would make me think they're building to that,
Mm-hmm.
other than the announcement from Comic-Con.
No, I
Like
agree.
narratively, I have not seen a single thing that's like, oh, that glowing blue cube might be an Infinity Stone,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you're like, oh, I see what they're doing. Like, that's cool. That means we're gonna get Thanos. Like, they haven't even planted any seeds to be like, oh, Doctor Doom. There was a mention or something about this or that, nothing. I haven't
Mm-hmm.
heard anything. So
No.
maybe it would be in Marvel's best interests after whatever this multiverse saga is to just reset the start line. If you're gonna keep all the same actors, like end all their arcs, get that shit out of the way, and then just start afresh.
I mean, maybe.
I don't know. But I do love that at least with Captain America and Iron Man, we got finality to their arcs and closure for their characters in Endgame. Like I appreciate so much that Marvel was actually willing to say like this is the end. Literally, it's in the title.
Mm, that's a good point.
So I do love that about, Tony snapping his fingers and Captain America going to a different timeline. It was like, okay, this is the end. So like if you just stopped watching right there, you're like, that's it. Yeah, it makes sense.
Now, my question is this, and this isn't something we discussed in pre-production.
Hmm.
Is there a version of Endgame where both of them die through sacrifice?
It's hard to say. I like the sacrifice of snapping your fingers. It's a very powerful moment. It has agency. I would hate to see like Captain America just end up like dying at the hands of Thanos, like to save his friends. Like, I mean, I don't know. That just sounds so brutal. But it could be really tragic. That would definitely defy expectations. If like Cap jumped into a battle and literally Thanos just killed him.
Be
I would
like
not have expected that.
be like Krillin dying in Dragon Ball Z or something.
Yeah, at least they have the Dragon Balls. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I could see it. I'm trying to think of a scenario that I think would be as powerful as snapping your fingers, so both characters could get, the proper death moment, death scene.
Hmm.
Because Tony's was, dude, everybody I think was crying
Hmm.
when he's laying down. He can't even talk, and they're all sort of saying goodbye, and you're like, oh my God. I never thought I would cry at Avengers Endgame, but here we are.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What about you? Do you think there's a scenario where they both die?
I think that there is, but it would have to be done where it didn't feel like they were both kind of stepping on each other's deaths,
Yeah.
right?
Well, because
Uh,
like we lost Black Widow in the same movie.
and it didn't feel like she was given enough closure for as an audience, right? Like it
Yeah.
felt kind of weird. Like so much reverence was given to the character of Iron Man, and we had closure as an audience at the end, but we didn't get that with Black Widows. It almost wasn't even acknowledged by other characters within the universe. So I think it could definitely work. I think the problem is how do you do it where you make both of them seem justifiable to the audience, right?
Yeah. That always did bother me that they did the whole funeral scene or like where they have everybody standing at the side of that lake and they like send out that Iron Man, his original thing that Pepper gave him, and they like send him off. And it was like, how do you not have like a nod somewhere in there to Black Widow as well? Like in that scene, like that always bothered me. Like right afterwards, I'm trying to remember who's standing next to the lake.
In
Oh, it's
the
Barton. It's
Yeah,
Barton and
yeah.
Scarlet Witch and Wanda. And they're standing and he's like, do you think she knows? And She's like, yeah, she does because she sacrificed herself. So she totally believed that they would accomplish their mission, right? She wouldn't have sacrificed herself. If she didn't believe it.
Hmm.
So she knew they would do it, which was great. I was glad they acknowledged her in that moment, but I was a little bummed that I was like, they have everybody, in their black suits and they're all here to honor Tony. And then it was like, no mention of her,
Yeah.
even though she died essentially not in the same battle. And I also thought it was so jarring that she wasn't a part of the Endgame team up, you know?
Also, I agree, especially that moment with the all the female Avengers, and you're like, yeah, you're leaving out the first and arguably the most important female Avenger. Come
Yeah,
on.
like I mean, it was heartbreaking. It sucks that she had to sacrifice herself, but I don't know. I just always thought that funeral scene, it was a little weird. I was like, I feel like they should have included her in some way. And I don't know, maybe it's something I missed, and if it's in there, let me know. All right, CP, let's do a little bit of MCU trivia.
Ooh, I love trivia, D man.
So, I guess the title, Endgame, was kept under wraps until the movie's release. The Rousseau brothers misled fans with working titles like Infinity Gauntlet and claimed the real title would be a spoiler, despite it being hinted at in Infinity War by Doctor Strange, which I know Endgame because he did say that. We're in the Endgame now.
Mm,
That was one of the, when people are speculating, that was one of the titles that a lot of people thought would make it. So, but I do think it was ended up being appropriately titled because, as I mentioned earlier, I think that whole movie provided a finality to the entire, Infinity War or Infinity Saga that we wouldn't have otherwise had a chance to do.
hmm
Robert Downey Jr. filmed Tony Stark's death scene last. The directors made this choice to give him time to mentally prepare for the emotional farewell, which carried significant weight for the actor and the character.
I think that was actually a smart move. I mean, he'd been playing him for a long time through a lot of movies.
Yeah, and you also think, with schedules and everything between all of the actors and all this stuff, that could have easily like been like, hey, we're gonna film this first because everybody's here and we just need to get it out of the way because we have to have it. So
Hmm.
I could totally see a world where, with productions as big as MCU films and, timelines that are crazy, it's like, hey, we got to get this done. But to do it last and to do that as proper closure for Robert Downey Jr., I thought was kind of cool.
Hmm.
The during the time heist, the America's ass line wasn't in the script. Chris Evans' initial reaction to it was laughter, but the filmmakers decided to keep it as they thought it brought levity to an otherwise serious scene.
Okay.
Which
Okay.
I do like that line. I mean, the MCU is always known for its one-liners. It's kind
Yeah.
of quick wit, particularly Tony Stark.
Hmm.
But what does he say? I think one of my favorite lines in the entire MCU is like in Iron Man 2 when he's like, "I have successfully privatized world peace." And
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh my God, that is incredibly arrogant." Like the ego on this guy is just out of control. This was something you just mentioned, but I also wanted to bring up because we've talked about it a little bit before. But the iconic moment where the female heroes unite was suggested by the actresses themselves during a casual conversation. The idea snowballed into a full scene, which was included despite criticisms of fan service.
Yeah. Never felt genuine to me.
Well, I mean, there's a couple things, but one is also like in the midst of this entire big battle, like all the female characters happen to be within frame.
Hmm.
You're kind of like logistically, this feels a little off. Like you guys just sort of shoehorned it in there. Never really had a problem with it, I think, the way some other fans did. But I think my biggest criticism was simply that Black Widow wasn't in it.
That's why it didn't feel genuine.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like she should be the one at the forefront,
Hmm.
and her missing really kind of killed it for me. But I mean, I know there's all this sort of like woke conversation around it, like, and that never really bothered me all that much. It's seriously, I think it's like less than 10 seconds.
Hmm.
It's not a big deal in terms of taking over the movie or anything. I thought it totally works. And that's not even to say that, right? White male, I don't know,
Hmm.
maybe a bunch of, female fans found that scene fantastic. So, you never know. But the Rousseau brothers filmed Infinity War and Endgame back to back. This made for a grueling production
Oh,
schedule. That makes
wow.
sense. With
Yeah.
many actors filming scenes for both movies on the same day without knowing how either would end.
Oh,
And
wow.
that is why I'm talking about like you could have easily filmed that Tony death scene way earlier because you're like, hey, let's just, we're not going to film this thing linearly. Like we're going to just make production as efficient as it can
Hmm.
be.
Hmm. Wow.
The scene where Loki escapes with the Tesseract during the time heist wasn't just a plot device. It was added after discussions about setting up the Loki Disney Plus series, which explores the consequences of this event. Now, I think everybody sort of, at this point, I don't even know if the Disney Plus series had even been announced.
No, I don't think. I don't think. I don't remember it being.
But I do remember sort of the way that scene unfolds, feeling like it was going to lead to something. It just felt weird that like Loki would sneak off grabbing the Tesseract and then like we never see or hear from him. You're like, see, there's a project in the works. There's something that they're going to do with him.
Hmm.
So that scene just felt too loose end.
Hmm.
Like what? Oh, he's never going to show up again. Yeah, right. Let's see. Endgame is the longest MCU movie at the time. So I don't know if that's still true, but up to that point, it was at
I
3 hours and two
I
minutes
think it
long.
still is the longest.
So its length reflects the director's belief that the culmination of 11 years of storytelling deserved a proper send-off without cutting corners. And they do this pretty well. There's not really, it's an easy watch for 3 hours. I don't really feel like they waste a lot of time. I mean, is there anywhere in Endgame where you're like, cut it?
No, for the most part, it seems pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I
There-
think it works.
Mhm.
Because how many movies have we watched and we're like, ooh, you could cut a lot, like just to bring the runtime down? Like it feels long.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so this is a brisk three. Like that was not bad. Chris Evans' final scene as Captain America wasn't his old man appearance. Instead, his last shot was of him saying Avengers Assemble during the climactic battle. Evans later
Oh,
revealed he was overwhelmed with emotion on the set.
what a great scene to be your final one.
I mean, that is really, really epic. I mean, because I also love when you think about the Avengers Assemble line. It's been alluded to, but never said properly in the entirety of all the Avengers films. He doesn't say it in Avengers 1. He almost says it at the closing, cut to black in Age of Ultron. Nobody says it in Infinity War. And then he finally gets to say it. But it did feel like Marvel was very intentional. I don't know if they had the entire Infinity Saga mapped out, but sort of knowing that, like, when we get to that, whatever that finale is, that's when we're going to say it.
Hmm.
I don't think like they forgot and then they're eventually like, "Oh, okay." I'm like,
Just
"No. You're
yeah,
paying out. Everybody's expecting this. They've been waiting for this." And it was badass.
no, I totally agree.
Dude, my theater went insane.
I know, I know.
Okay. This was something that we just talked about. Natasha Romanoff's death received less overt attention than Tony Stark. Scarlett Johansson later shared that this was intentional, as Natasha wouldn't have wanted a big ceremony. Her legacy is more subtly honored in Black Widow, the movie, which, again, I kind of get, but I mean, you
Mm,
can respect someone's wishes, like when they pass, but also, like, having a funeral is also about closure for the people that are still here,
I don't,
and
I don't. I mean, I tend to agree with that. I think it's more of a for the fans. I felt like we didn't have the closure for the character's death.
oh, here it is. Star Wars moment. It's like Chewie not getting a medal.
Yeah, I
You're like,
know.
why? Why didn't he get one? And there, I mean, it's just, I mean, probably an
Just
oversight.
racism,
No,
racism.
it's just probably space racism. Who do they think they are? Frieza? Uh, no, but it's probably like it's an oversight for whatever reason. They were like, oh, Chewie just didn't end up with a medal. We didn't give one of the droids, whatever. Yeah, everybody was like, what the hell? And I
Hmm.
felt like that's how this was, where it was kind of like, what? Like, you're not going to honor her that way? And even if she is right, and there were discussions about this, and they're like, no, Natasha wouldn't have wanted all that. She was a spy and all this stuff. I think, like I said, it's closure for the people that are still here, as well as an opportunity for them to honor, their fallen hero, their fallen, Avenger.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And then I think everybody does know this, but did you know Joe Rousseau plays the grieving man in Steve Rogers' support group? And that also made him the first openly gay LGBTQ plus character in the MCU.
I did not know that.
And Anthony Rousseau, his brother, also appears as one of the Shield agents retrieving Loki in the time heist. So they did have their cameos, which is pretty
Oh,
cool.
I did not know that.
Oh, and it's like a long-standing, it is sort of a tradition. Like, I don't know if you remember, but like Peter Jackson is in the Lord of the Rings movies.
Hmm.
George Lucas is in like Revenge of the Sith. This is something that happens. So I
Yeah.
think that is kind of a cool Easter egg. I know, like, we know this, but like a fun Easter egg was obviously Howard the Duck finally appears. So technically, wasn't he in a post-credit
Mm,
scene for Guardians?
yeah, I wouldn't call that fun.
It was kind of cool, assuming that Marvel's never going to move forward with like a large role for that character. Like it was kind of an interesting cameo, but
Hmm.
it was a little jarring because it was like, what the hell is he doing here? Like, does he even know anybody here? Like, how did he even get the call?
Yeah.
Isn't it supposed to be that like all of Doctor Strange's the portal guys, they went and like got the people, like
Hmm.
told like how would they even know to get him?
I know. And what's he gonna do when they got him anyway?
During the time heist, a young Hank Pym is seen working in the lab. On the table is a prototype of his iconic Ant-Man helmet, which I think everybody did recognize
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's kind of obvious.
I know I think it was the final Stan Lee cameo as well, if you didn't know that, was in Avengers Endgame,
Yep.
which he was de-aged as a hippie.
Hmm.
He died in 2018, and it says the car that he drives the license plate read 420 as a reference to marijuana from that era that they were in.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was interesting because I know he got his actual sort of pre-roll credits send off, I think, with Captain America or Captain Marvel
Mm-hmm.
was when they had actually like openly acknowledged his death. But that was his last cameo. And that was a lot of fun when he would show
Hmm.
up. I think for fans, he was sort of a larger than life, real world artist. And to see him get all those cameos and really have fun with it, Tony Stank and Hef
Yeah,
and even this guy, what does he
yeah,
do? He's like peace and love.
yeah.
So that was pretty cool. But yeah, just a little bit of trivia. That was fun. I'm sure most of the diehard MCU fans know probably some of that stuff.
Probably some of it.
Now let's do a couple rapid fire questions, CP. I'm gonna throw them out there to you.
All right, let's do it. I'm ready.
All right, this one is pretty wild, but I want to know what you think, which is who had the better character arc in the MCU, Iron Man or Captain America? And you can only pick one.
Iron Man.
Okay. I mean, oh man, I love Captain America's trilogy and his growth in, the overall MCU. I like how he goes from sort of much more the selfless, yes man sort of soldier, like, hey, I'm this guy, all the way to like at the end of Civil War, he's like, no, now I have to do it. I'm not
Hmm.
taking orders from anybody.
Yeah,
I do love that arc. I mean, I thought it was fantastic.
I would agree.
All right, this one I think is pretty easy, but I still would love to know what your thoughts are. Who do you think was the MVP in the final battle?
Captain America.
Okay. I did think him picking up the hammer and
Hmm.
that epic shot of him walking up to all of Thanos' forces and just basically being like, I guess it's me. I mean, it's so epic when everybody shows up, and like that is a ton of fun. Obviously, I was going to say Iron Man snapping his fingers was incredible. The sacrifice was MVP worthy for sure. But yeah, Captain America lifting the hammer and totally
Hmm.
kicking ass out there was awesome. Let's see. Ooh, okay. Do you think if they were given the opportunity, Tony could wield Mjolnir and Cap could use the Infinity Gauntlet and not die?
Given the opportunity.
Yeah, meaning that like I don't know, Cap was the one that was down, knocked out, and Tony's there and he's gonna like I'm gonna call Mjolnir.
No, I don't think it would have happened.
But
I
do you
think
think
Cap
Cap
could
could
have.
use the
I think
Infinity
Cap
Gauntlet?
could have used the gauntlet, but I don't think
So we
Tony
talked
could have
about it
used
earlier. I mean, I
Mjolnir.
guess on that note, rapid fire question. Do you think if Cap had used the Infinity Gauntlet, he would have died? I don't think he would
I
have.
don't think he would have either.
I think he, as a super soldier, like he would probably be able to, take the effects that the gauntlet has on whoever snaps their fingers. But I mean, would he die? I don't know.
Hmm.
Probably not.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. If you could party with one Avenger, who would you party with?
Oh, Tony Stark. Come on, he's got to be the best guy to party with. He
I
could
mean,
just jet set you over to Dubai or whatever.
yeah, I mean, I think Tony would be a lot of fun. I mean, his resources here on Earth would be wild, but like, wouldn't it be cool to go like party with Thor back at his home?
Like especially old school Thor,
Yeah,
like
like
in
that would
Thor
be kind of
one,
cool.
like just like throwing like mugs on the ground.
Yeah.
Another that guy that would be pretty cool too.
Like
Very
I
good
I
point.
don't know. I would be down for that. This one's interesting. But assuming that there will be another sacrifice made, who do you think the next Avenger will be to make a Tony Stark level sacrifice?
I think just based on scale and his role in the MCU, I think it would have to be Tom Holland's Spider-Man.
Okay. I mean, he's incredibly popular. Like, I think
But
people
he
like
also is the only one with the longevity to make it be a meaningful sacrifice.
it's crazy. He's already had three movies. They're already working on the fourth. Like, that's how popular
He's had
Spider-Man
three
is.
Spider-Man movies, and he was in what? 10?
Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame.
Yeah. So he's the only one I think who is a reasonable choice to make a sacrifice.
That would be interesting because he has spoken about sort of passing the mantle of Spider-Man along, particularly to the very popular Miles Morales
Hmm.
from the Into the Spider-Verse. So, who has not been properly introduced within like the live action MCU.
Hmm.
So, there's a world in which a mantle could be passed. You
Hmm.
know, I think the way the Into the Spider-Verse set it up though was really cool, where it's like the Peter Parker was never Spider-Man in his timeline. He is Spider-Man. Like it's
Hmm.
not like there was a mantle passed to him,
Hmm.
which I think works really well. But you could always do the mantle pass. That could be
Hmm.
cool. Before we close out this episode, CP, wanted to do a couple lists, but I thought
Ooh.
because you're wearing your Captain America shirt and we're going to switch it up, I want to know what your top three Captain America moments are, and then we'll do my top three Iron Man moments.
Ooh. Okay. Top three Captain America movements. Honorable mention from Avengers when he says Hulk smash.
Oh yeah, I like that too. Just
But
because I love how the Hulk, like they took this character that I think was not maybe everybody's favorite in Avengers, and then they just made him so awesome.
yeah,
They're
he
like, just
was.
max him out, let him smash whatever he wants, have him run through walls, have him anything, just have him do
Hmm.
it. And then he saves Tony at the
Hmm.
end, both catching him and roaring to probably jumpstart his heart.
Yeah, it
I
was
don't know.
awesome.
But yeah, he was awesome.
Number three, when Iron Man and Captain America fight each other at the end of Civil War.
Incredible
Just the
moment.
two of them. All the other Avengers are gone. It's just the two of them in their showdown.
Yeah,
Great sequence. Great scene.
agreed. I love it.
But
I like right there too, where I mean, I'm doing the Iron Man list, but I do love when Tony's like, or Captain America's like, I was your friend, and Tony's like, I don't care. He killed my mom, and I'm
yeah.
like, damn, what a line.
Yep.
That
Yep.
was an incredible line.
Number two, throwback to the original Avengers 1. The sequence with Captain America and all the Avengers getting ready to go into battle.
I mean, that is epic.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a cinematic moment.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
it's more than just like an MCU moment. That's like a cinematic moment. It's the culmination of this idea that you could take all these different franchises and bring them together, and they do it right there in maybe one of the most iconic shots from the MCU, if not the most iconic shot. Incredible.
And number one, Endgame, Captain America with the hammer.
Picks up Mjolnir,
Yep.
and if you were there live,
Oh,
which I wish everybody could relive that at least
oh my,
once
it's
or
so
live
good.
it, but if you could relive it, I would do that too. But it's so epic.
So good.
Okay, so top three Iron Man moments. I think number three for me, it's going to be when Thanos in Infinity War throws a moon at Tony Stark.
Yeah.
I love that whole battle, like when all the Avengers are fighting and the Guardians. But I love particularly when it does boil down to Thanos versus Tony. I thought that scene was very epic.
Hmm.
Number two is going to be the snap. So I think
Okay.
it's a great scene. I think it completes his arc perfectly. It also concludes our conversation on where I stand on whether Captain America should have done it or not. Yeah, I just think that was such a powerful moment overall in having an actual closure for arcs in the MCU and then setting up, the emotional send-off and his monologue, which were also fantastic.
Hmm.
Honestly, this is one of the moments that gets me to cheer the most, but it is one of my favorite Iron Man moments, and it's Avengers. It's when Loki throws him out of the tower. His suit comes
Mm.
down and catches him, and then he literally powers up, and then he comes back up, and all of a sudden the portal opens, and they have this shot where he's like, "Oh shit!" and the HUD switches to his attack mode, and then he like hits the thrusters and starts flying up towards the portal, and stuff starts pouring in, and you just see him like.
Mhm.
And then like they have a shot where he like flies by explosions, and I remember I'm in the theater, I was like, oh my god, this is happening. This is everything any comic book fan has ever dreamed of is happening right now on screen. And it is, I already knew from that moment, I was like, the rest of this is going to be epic as hell. There's no way this is going to let us down. It's going to be incredible. And then it was, but I still cheer when it happens.
Interesting. So you didn't pick the nuke sacrifice from Avengers,
No.
and you didn't pick I Am Iron Man from
Iron Man.
Iron Man? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about that. I mean, I talked about it a little bit in Mirroring the Snap, but at the same time, I also really love the conversation between Steve and Cap on the,
On the helicarrier.
yeah, the helicarrier, where they do go back and forth. Great scene. I mean,
Mhm.
there's just so many. It's a top three, but that one scene just always gets me so amped. I'm like, this is going to be the best movie.
Oh,
And then
it's great.
leads to that iconic moment you talked about, which is literally one of the best shots. And whoever wrote the theme song for the Avengers is like amazing.
Oh, it's a
The
great
Alan
song.
Silvestri.
I think so.
Because what the hell? That every once in a while, someone just knocks it out of the park. Because I think about it, I'm like, the theme song for Avengers, I mean, somebody could have wrote that for Iron Man. Like, that could have been like Iron Man's personal theme
Oh
song.
my gosh. How cool would that have been?
But you know what I mean? Like, whoever wrote it for the Avengers, I'm like, that literally sounds like the Avengers. Like, for instance, John Williams wrote the theme music to Harry Potter. I remember hearing it and I was like, son of a bitch, that is Harry Potter. Like, 100%. I was like, this is exactly what I probably heard in my head, but could never put into music. That is Harry Potter. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, all right, CP. That does it for our episode this week. Fun discussion. I want to know what our listeners think. Who should have made the sacrifice? And then, obviously, we talked about many, many different things this week. Let us know your thoughts and continue the conversations. We love hearing from you guys. So you can follow the show at filmmakerscompass.com, where we have a feed of all of our previous episodes, as well as links to all of our socials. Is at Film Comp Podcast or at Film Comp Pod. You can follow me at Big Kid D-Man and CP.
You can follow me at NDCal5. Thanks for hanging out and talking movies with us. We'll see you back here next week. Until then, keep watching movies.